abilities of current technologies in 2021. We recognize that the useful life of demonstration project transit buses is the same as useful life for commercialized products. While maintenance costs rise on any transit vehicle as it ages, regardless of fuel type, continuing to serve a vehicle with parts and components based on its first-of-a-kind demonstration design undoubtedly presents some challenges. Not only is today's technology vastly different, but when these buses were put into service, but our supply chain is also different as a company as the industry has matured. We're committed to supporting Foothill Transit's fleet of battery electric buses so the community can continue to realize the benefit of clean, quiet transportation. It's our commitment to Foothill Transit, the Foothill Transit Board, the Los Angeles County community as our very first customer that guided Proterra's decision to locate our electric bus and battery manufacturing in Los Angeles County. Our local facility, we employ 200 people, including workers. We're proud to call Los Angeles County home. The close partnership that Proterra has enjoyed with Foothill Transit over the past decade has guided our innovations. We're now on our 5th generation transit bus powered by our industry-leading battery technology that we manufacture in the City of Industry. What Foothill Transit has learned through the deployment of Proterra's first generation technology has also given birth to a new and growing industry. From your first demonstration project, the transit industry has learned a lot about en-route fast charging technology, working with the local utility to design favorable that are now utilized by every North American manufacturer battery electric buses. What started in Los Angeles County has grown into a transportation revolution. Today, Proterra proudly serves over 130 communities with over 600 vehicles on the road. This success started right here at Foothill Transit. You have changed the transportation industry in North America. There is no debate about that. If we as a nation are to combat climate change and global warming, the customers embrace zero-emission electric buses and permanently retire diesel and fossil fuels. Foothill grateful for your ongoing partnership and commitment to our shared vision of transportation for all. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Madam Chair, that concludes public comment.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. We move to, well, Doran, do you have anything you'd like to share? We move to item 6, possible fair revenue program. And we have Michelle Lopez Caldwell, Director of Finance and
launch, if I could. Again, very grateful to have Devin Deming here with us. Devin's also been a great partner. And Devin is the expert, and I've got to say she's taken on a big challenge. It's complicated. I even continue to struggle with some of the details. So anything that I briefed you on or any of the details, assume I got it all wrong, because Devin's got the right answers here, and ask her all those tough questions, because this is very much an evolving effort. And like I say, Devin is the expert. So Devin, thanks for joining us. And Michelle, take it away.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Chair Sternquist and Board, for the opportunity to speak to you today. The
Michelle?
topic that, yes?
Good morning. Can I just interrupt for 1 second? All of a sudden, I just don't want to lose anyone. on my screen, there's a little box and it just says waiting, 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 and that little circle is going round in circles. Does anyone know what's happening?
Your Wi-Fi could be weak at this point.
Okay, so I'm going to keep my other iPad here handy just in case.
I mean, I'm not a technical person, Roy. Maybe you want to tell her something different, but
Corey, just in case it goes out before I can reconnect, would you mind taking over if that happens?
Happy to cover for you, not a problem.
Thank you. Go ahead, Michelle.
Okay, thank you. So the item before you today is to bring you up to date, as Doran just said, on the regional fare proposals with the Fareless initiative and to discuss the UPass program, which is Metro's version of the Class Pass, and our possible participation with the UPass program. Next slide, please. Sorry, my computer's a little slow too.
Okay.
All right. So as you can see, this is a brief description of the LA Metro's UPass program. And it's slightly different than our program because our students pay are, I guess, what you would call the opt-in, or let's see, fees are applied. So you can see on this board report that the students may or may not pay their school. In the ClassPass program, our students pay a fee at the beginning of the year, $5 or $7, whatever it might be. And then the university or the community college reimburses us per ride. It's the UPass program is slightly different in that the fees may be applied to only the students who are getting a pass, where the fees in the ClassPass program are mandatory for all students. And the reason this is important is because it allows the school to collect the revenue and then pay us for only the rides that are taken. They do share the same goal as Foothill Transit's ClassPass program, which is to increase ridership and make ridership more available to the young people. And the benefits for Foothill Transit, if your decision today is that we join in with the UPass, we will continue to keep all of our ClassPass agreements in place. What will happen is the LA Metro's UPass students will be able to ride Foothill Transit service at no cost to the student. And Foothill will receive 75 cents per boarding for all UPass rides. So that's a new revenue that we have not currently had. And going forward, then we can add those revenues. The biggest impact, I believe, will be at the Cal State LA, which is, as you all know, near the Amani station. The students can ride from there, and they'll now be able to ride all Foothill Transit at no additional charge. So next slide, please. Instead of me trying to explain in any kind of detail all of these complicated programs that Metro is proposing, we've invited Devin Deming to come and speak to the board today. Devin is a deputy executive officer. She began the UPass program at LA Metro, and now she's also in charge of the Fareless Systems Initiative. So Devin, take it away.
Thank you, Michelle. Well done. Good morning. First, I'm happy to be here with you this morning to answer or to explain really the difference between these two programs and to answer any questions you might have. Next slide. So I'm Devin. Michelle introduced me. I am the interim deputy executive officer over at FS, and I have been at Metro a little over 5 years. I did come to Metro start House program and our programs.
Devin, hold on a moment. Someone is not muted. And we are hearing a lot of discussion. If you could mute yourself, please. Go ahead, Devin. I'm sorry.
No problem. We can go to the next slide. So here's a little bit about the UPass program. Again, this is Metro's program that Michelle was describing. So the UPasses, we do these in two different ways. One is the little sticker you see on the bottom of the screen. That's actually a tap sticker. So it has the tap insides, the tap chip and the tap antenna that would normally be in our tap cards, but they're in a sticker that can be stuck directly onto the student ID, which converts the student ID to a transit pass. I think you all are using something similar now in your program as well, so you're probably familiar with it. And then we also do have cards for schools that can't use the sticker function. So the U passes are valid for unlimited boardings on all of Metro services, including our bus, rail, express services, and then they're good on local services for participating transit agencies, unless the agency specifies additional services they would like to include. So the participating colleges agree to pay 75 cents per boarding for actual boardings used by their students each term. And so the way that works is that the year is divided into 3 terms. We have a fall, winter is 1 term, a spring is a 2nd term, and then a summer is a 3rd term. So we cover the full year, including all of the breaks in between, and then colleges are able to load or reload passes for each term depending on who is participating from their college. So that's a little bit different, like Michelle said. Really how we would describe your program is more of an opt-out program, meaning that everyone is included. All students are paying their transportation fee unless they have the ability to opt out. In our program, the majority of our schools are running on an opt-in program where only the students who participate in the program are paying. The downside of this is that it's more expensive because that cost is held on just a fewer number of students covering the cost of the program. Some of our schools do sponsor the program for the whole student body and the students don't pay anything, but the majority of our schools are charging students a rate per term to participate. And we help them determine what that rate is based on what their cost of participation is for their overall program and the number of participants they have. So at the end of each term, Metro reconciles all of the boardings at each agency's college and reimburses all of the participating transit agencies. And you'll see on the next slide, we have 9 other transit agencies that are participating in this program. Yes, there they are. So these are the 9 that are currently participating in the program in addition to Metro. And the way that works is when we reconcile the boardings at the end of the term, we're reimbursing all of these transit agencies at the full 75 cents per boarding. So there's no administrative fee, there's no pass-through, there's no percentage. We just collect the 75 cents from the school and then we distribute it to each of the transit agencies. And so the transit agencies at the end of each term, we'll send them a report and we'll have a little back and forth with each transit agency to make sure that both sides agree on how many boardings were taken by each school, that the boarding numbers match up. And then the reimbursement amount will be on the regional settlement check for that month. So it doesn't come every single month, but it comes at the month following the end of each term. So hopefully that makes sense. Next. So these are our current UPass participants. We have 21 of them actually overall. And I've noted that 2 that currently have dual status with Foothill Transit Class Pass. So at Pasadena College and Rio Hondo College, they both have had much longer standing programs with both of our agencies than UPass started in 2016. And both of these colleges had programs that have been around a long time before that. So we've grandfathered them in and they've maintained their dual status with your agency also. So you all have a separate agreement with them and we have a separate agreement with them. So they basically have 2 agreements. Next slide. And this is just a visual representation of those schools, which I find fun. Next slide. So moving on to the fareless system initiative, and I just want to explain how the 2 are different. So the UPass program will continue to exist primarily because the new fareless system initiative is only at this point going to be covering community colleges. So you could see on the previous slides, there were a lot of schools that don't qualify as community colleges. So UCLA, USC, Caltech, LMU, we've got tons of 4-year universities that don't qualify as community colleges. Those schools will continue to exist under the UPass program and the UPass agreements aren't changing. We'll continue to bill them 75 cents a boarding. We'll continue to reimburse all the transit agencies at the end of every term. Nothing is changing about those schools. The new fareless system initiative was unanimously passed by our board in May with some additional requirements, many additional requirements. So first of all, subject to a final financial plan, which we're bringing back to our board in September, and also while pursuing cost-sharing agreements and reporting to our board monthly on the development, launch, and performance of the program. So requirements from our board that they included in that motion included streamlining participation, and that's both with the application processes and with administration. And the full FSI project is set to cover both a student portion, K-12 and community college, and also a low-income portion, which we've divided that into 2 phases. So phase 1 now is the K-12 and community colleges. So that's the one that we're moving forward with first. And that under the K-12 and community college program, our board has asked us to implement cost sharing agreements with the K-12 districts and community colleges. Community colleges, we already have cost sharing agreements with, so we'll talk about how we're going to handle those and transition some of them. And then also our board was very, very specific in as we roll out this regional program, because we would like FSI to be a regional program and we would love for all of the transit agencies in the region to participate. But our board has specifically instructed us to maintain existing agreements between colleges and transit agencies, exactly like your ClassPass program. So if there are any community colleges that are in ClassPass, we're specifically stating that those agreements would not change. And so that's one thing that was really important to our board. It's been really important to me. Doran and Michelle know that I have been fighting for that all along as this fareless system task force has been working over the last 9 or 10 months. And then also our board asked us to identify a new funding source to cover FSI because we were specifically told that they don't want it to take away from any of our existing programs. So they don't want any of our bus service to be affected or any of our customer experience programs to be affected. So they wanted us specifically to look for new funding. So next. So the reasoning for starting with this K-12 or K-14, as we're calling it, K-12 and community college, is that in LA County, there's a significant number of students that are low income. And so we see 69% of those are already participating in free and reduced priced meal programs. That's a mouthful for low income communities. We're also seeing health issues cropping up in LA County. And so we know already 23% of LA adults are obese, but that's actually starting as early as junior high school. And if you look at the numbers for lower income communities, that junior high school percentage could be as high as 37%, which is pretty shocking. We know all of the health information about taking transit. People are more likely to be more active, to walk more. They're 44% less likely to be overweight. And we think this is an important health issue in our county. Also, in terms of getting an education, we know that even a 2-year degree increases income potential by up to 47%. However, only 30% of community college students graduate, and those numbers are even lower in our African American and Latino communities. And just a note here, we've been working with Rio Hondo College, which is one college that we share in common. We have been working with them on a research project through the Kresge Foundation, and they were able to show that for their students that are using their Transit Pass program, those students have a 2% higher graduation rate than the general population of students. So that's really significant that we're able to show that having access to transportation is actually increasing their success rate. Next. So for this phase 1, our goals are to increase ridership, increase student success, improve student health by building on existing metro and regional student pass programs. So we're not trying to recreate the wheel. We are trying to build on everyone's success in the region and just expand those programs and make them easier to access for more students. And the way that we're seeking to do this is through the cost sharing partners with districts, schools, and community colleges, and also to some extent the transit agencies. Next. So a little bit more about the community college partnership. So I mentioned that our goal is to maintain all existing agreements. So that means that nothing that happens right now between your ClassPass schools and Foothill Transit would change in terms of the payment. Everything that the way the schools are set up to charge a transportation fee to their students and the way the schools pay Foothill Transit, none of that would change. We don't want to touch anybody's agreement for any reason. The only thing that we would like to do is help in making sure that we can get a regional pass loaded instead of a local pass. So if Foothill Transit opts in to participate in the FSI community college program and is one of the transit agencies that is valid on that FSI regional pass, then we would want to make sure that the community colleges, and I believe there are 4 community colleges in your class pass program, we would want to make sure that those community colleges can load an FSI regional college pass instead of a local pass. So that means instead of just having a pass that's good on Foothill Transit, their pass would be good on all Metro services, but also all services from all of the other transit agencies that opt into the program. So that would give them a lot more mobility. And like Dora mentioned earlier, that there's no additional cost associated with that because we're not changing any of the agreements that are currently in place. We're just adding service to the pass that they already have. So that's how we're handling all of the existing agreements. And then this second part is really more related to Metro's own UPass program that I described earlier. Most of our community colleges in that program are in an opt-in setup right now, where only, a few students are paying, the students that are riding are paying. And we're trying to help them all transition to the transportation fee basis that works the way your class pass program works. Actually, we love your model. You've set the bar for the county. And so now we're trying to seek that. So we're encouraging our UPass schools to transition to an FSI partnership where for the first year, we would charge them $7 per student per year. That would cover this year coming up, starting next month, actually, starting August 2021. And that would give them, we would be able to distribute the tap cards to them, and it would cover all rides on participating transit agencies in the FSI College Pass. And then that would also give our UPass colleges time to assess their usage and implement a student referendum to implement a fee for year 2 if they want to. So we've heard from some colleges that they don't want to, that they would rather pay the cost on behalf of their students, which is fantastic. But some of the colleges, want to pursue a transportation fee program similar to the class pass program. And so we're trying to give them time to do that because we know that's a lengthy process. Next. So similarly, we're rolling out K-12 partnerships, and the K-12 partnerships are similar, slightly different. The cost would be $3 per student per year, and the same would include the distribution of tap cards and also unlimited rides on participating K-12 FSI transit agencies. So we're looking at these as 2 separate passes. And then so far, 38 districts have expressed interest in becoming partners. So that represents almost half the students in the county. We have about 1.4 public school students in the county, and almost 700,000 of them are in districts who've expressed interest in joining. So in terms of cost sharing, that doesn't generate a whole lot. That $2 million is only a small portion of the nearly $50 million that we think it'll cost us to run this pilot for 2 years. But it does allow schools to really be a partner with us, have some financial interest, and also help us champion the program. The cost differential between the community college $7 per student and the K-12 $3 per student is a couple of reasons. And one is that the community college boardings that we've seen in our UPass program average about 7 boardings a week, whereas the K-12 boardings throughout the county average about 3 boardings a week. And then also in terms of when we're looking at the base fare for how we're calculating revenue loss for our agencies, the K-12 cost per monthly pass, at least for our agency, is $24 a month. And then the community college cost, or the college vocational, we call it, monthly pass is $43 a month. So there's already a significant difference in pricing that exists in our fare structure. And so we didn't feel comfortable making these 2 amounts the same. But I think that the $3 and the $7 represents well where we are right now with the current boarding status and the current fare cost. Next. So the other thing we're doing is we're creating a Metro Youth Council. And if you've seen our CEO speaking at any public events lately, you might have heard her talk about this. So one thing that we've noticed is that we've been missing youth voices in our planning process, and we want to reach out to include them. This is a big, big program, as Doran mentions, and we really want to make sure that we're hearing from the students who are actually using the program in terms of how well the program is working. So this Youth Council is aimed specifically at students between 14 and 17 who represent diverse demographics around LA County. And our board is made up of 13 members, and the Youth Council will be made of 26 members, representing basically 2 members in each of those regions, representing all of our 9 subregions. And also, I just want to note that the reason that this ends at 17 is because currently we do allow 18 and over to participate in our councils and in advisory committees. So those students are already represented to some extent. And then also with all of the colleges we work with, the students are really involved in the planning process. So when we meet with administrators to launch a UPass program or, update the status of a UPass program, we always have student leaders involved in those phone calls. So we are hearing from them at some level, although we think we may be able to do a little better with that too. So we really are seeking to leverage the Youth Council efforts to make sure we're getting this right in terms of the student perspective, and also building a pipeline of riders and transit leaders as we move forward with these programs in LA County. Next. So in terms of funding, our board has asked us to make sure that whatever funding Metro uses for this program is also available to regional transit agencies. Our financial office is recommending that we use ARPA funds. Those are American Recovery Plan Act funds. As I mentioned earlier, they specifically, they specifically asked us to look for new funds to cover the cost of this program. So these ARPA funds are new funds. We have very few options in looking at other funds that wouldn't affect another existing program in our agency. And ARPA funds are also shared throughout the county. So yesterday, our board passed a motion that was the distribution plan for how all the ARPA funds that came into the county will be distributed. And I believe that each agency has already received the information on the amount of funding that they'll get through that program. And that was now confirmed by our board yesterday, so it is official. So we have been meeting with all of the transit agencies, and Doran and Michelle have been really involved throughout the whole task force period, actually. So now we're almost going on a year now, which is shocking and fascinating. But Doran and Michelle have both been really involved in those meetings. At different points, we were having the meetings weekly, and we're back to having meetings weekly with all of the regional transit agencies. Originally, it was just a few representatives, which Doran and Michelle were included in the original group. And now we've opened it up to all transit agencies in the county. So we're getting 40 to 50 participants every week in the meetings, which is great. It's really collaborative meeting. And I keep telling them it's my favorite meeting I get to do every week. So that group is well aware that we've been recommending this ARPA funding. I think most larger transit agencies, and Doran can weigh in on this, but most larger transit agencies are comfortable with that recommendation. The ones that are less comfortable with it are the smaller transit agencies that maybe didn't have as much money in their ARPA allocation. So we are continuing to look at other options. Some of the potential new funding that we anticipate getting into this program that could help in that manner are the district cost sharing, which I mentioned, it's not a huge amount of money, but it is still money that we're planning on revenue sharing with the participating transit agencies. And then also we are continuing to seek additional funding, including state and federal funding, grant funding, even we're looking at philanthropic funding. We're looking at really anything that could help cover the cost of this program, not only for Metro, but for all of the regional transit agencies. Next. Wow, my last slide. Yay. So you can all breathe now. So our next steps are, as I mentioned, we will report back to our board in September 2021 with our comprehensive funding plan that will cover both phase 1 and which is the K-12 and community college, and phase 2, which is low income. I will note that in those weekly ad hoc committee meetings with the transit agencies, we have not yet discussed the phase 2 funding plan, and we will be doing that before we come back to the board in September. We also are putting together information on the cost of current fare collection for our board. That question has been asked a lot, so we'll be providing that information in September. And as I mentioned, we're looking at ways to engage community college student voices specifically so that we can make sure the program is working for them. And I think that's all I have. I'm happy to take questions. I know that was a lot of information, so I just appreciate your time.
Thank you, Devin. Christina, do we have any public comment?
Chair Sternquist, if I might just go through this last slide
Sure.
before we go to questions. Okay, thank you. So there are actually 2 recommendations before you today. The first is, first let me say thank you to Devin, and then, okay, so the item is to authorize the CEO to enter into an agreement with LA Metro to enable Foothill Transit to participate in the UPass program. To participate in the UPass program. And then the second is to provide direction to staff regarding Foothill Transit participation in the FSI program with the K through 12 participants. And as Devin said, we'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any public comment?
Madam Chair, there's no request to speak.
Okay. So do we have any executive board members who would like to comment or ask a question?
Cynthia, and I have my hand raised if no one else does.
It doesn't show, but go ahead.
Oh, okay. I can see it on my end. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I can see the logic or how the MOU between Metro and Foothill for the class pass might work well. But on the K through 12, I've just got all sorts of questions. I note that you said building ridership in the future, but is the initial goal to actually deliver children to school, to get them to and from school? And if so, you're talking about minors, you're talking about they already have established school bus systems. And we as Foothill Transit do not, to my knowledge, we don't serve those pathways to the schools. And I just don't know exactly how that would work or be more effective for us to be involved in that kind of a system.
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer that. So we have been meeting with schools. We've been having district information sessions almost every day since I took this position June 1st. And we do hear a lot from the schools that schools are, especially schools for the younger elementary, middle school, are located within neighborhoods and are walking distance or biking distance from homes often. And one thing that we note is that, first of all, the cost is very, very low intentionally, because for $3, it costs $2 to buy a tap card. So for that additional $1, they're getting unlimited rides on all Metro services and all participating transit agency service through the duration of the pilot program. For the per year of the pilot program. And so we're really looking at that as not just a to and from school. If we were providing service to and from school every day, there's no way that $3 would be enough. But we're really looking at it to provide students around LA County with more opportunities for extracurricular activities as well. So whether that's, for older students, that might be an internship or a job, but even for a little bit younger students, it could be a museum, a beach, an amusement park, trips with families around the county. So we're looking at it really just giving students more travel opportunities. We are ready to launch with 6 districts, 2 districts and 2 full districts and 3 additional schools. So that's Culver City School District, Youth Build, which has about 8 schools around LA County, and then a couple of charter schools. We're actually getting ready to roll those out right now. And so what we've determined is that this will be a rolling implementation. We'll continue to add schools as schools are interested in joining the program. And similarly, we'll continue to add transit agencies as transit agencies are ready to join the program. So one thing that we've committed to doing is working with Doran and Michelle and other transit agencies also in identifying school districts that are in your service areas and having joint meetings with the school district and the transit agency to be able to answer questions to the school district about how this program might work and how they may be able to utilize the transit service in their area for their students better. And that could even be like field trips or, other things. But being able to meet with both Metro and the transit agency and the school district all at the same time will help everyone be on the same page and answer those kind of questions for the school districts.
And so I guess maybe it's in the name or saying K through 12. It's really for hopefully building ridership amongst our youth going forward or for the future. It really isn't for school purposes. It's really for other transportation, because especially with the younger kids, that would have to be used in conjunction with an adult using their own pass. So maybe you might want to consider coming up with a much better name or reference than K through 12.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, anyone else?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
My first question is, I believe there is one discrepancy here with regards to the college program. If I heard correctly, with Metro, the students can use the express buses, but with regards to ours, we do not allow the students to use the express bus. Is that not correct?
That's correct. That is correct. And the exception to that would be the Silver Streak. The Silver Streak and the Silver Line are under an MOU between our two agencies, the Silver to Silver MOU. So your pass holders can ride our service and our pass holders can ride your service because they run parallel on the same route, basically. But other than that, no, our student passes are good, yes, on our express services, which for us are like the Silver Line, the Orange Line, the 501 from Pasadena to North Hollywood. But understanding that unless you opt in to cover, because I know you have more longer distance services, commuter express services, those services are not covered unless you request them to be covered. And then we would have to set a different rate for those services.
Okay, so you do have a limitation then even within Metro service with regards to that.
All of Metro services are covered. So like if a student wanted to ride our Orange Line or Silver Line, they're covered.
Okay.
But
no,
for other
with the longer haul express type services, you mentioned that they would have to work an agreement with you regarding those.
For your longer haul services, if you wanted to include them, then we would have to work out separate pricing for what that service would cost. We are currently doing that for UCLA. UCLA has some very specific services that are run by transit agencies that like Long Beach goes from Long Beach only to UCLA. It has two stops, one stop in Long Beach and one stop at UCLA. So we're currently setting pricing and updating the agreements for the UCLA agreement to cover that particular service. But in general, to opt into the UPass program only covers local service for your agency unless there's a separate negotiation on the longer distance services.
Okay, got it. And along those lines, perhaps, I don't know, staff might want to explore that possibility. I don't know that we have full capacity on our express services. So along those lines, for some of the students that might be going longer distance, if we open up this program and it's advantageous to them to have a little bit of a faster trip, if we can explore the possibility of how, we might be able to incorporate them into that would be one of the things I might suggest.
Corey, on that point, and you hit a topic that was on my mind as well. Devin, if I'm hearing you correctly, if our board was to participate in UPass, one of the points that we could determine is if those express buses are included or are excluded. Is that correct? So that would be a choice that our board could make.
Yes, and you could set pricing for those services too. So if you wanted to include them, would it be at your regular per boarding rate? Would it be at a slightly lower rate to help students? Like that would be up to you to decide what the pricing on those special services.
And for the Foothill board members, for the sake of consistency, what you might consider is, if you choose to take action today, what you might consider is authorizing participation and mirror that with our Class Pass program, which does include Silver Streak, but doesn't include express routes. It may well be that you revisit the express route discussion for both of those programs down the road. I think this is going to be a period in the upcoming months as we transition out of COVID, where we're going to be looking at lots of different pass products and service structures. And, I think everything's really on the table. But for the ease of entry, that might be a good starting point to consider. I just offer that for your reflection.
Sure, I wasn't pushing that we do that today. I understand that. Got to be careful with those things because there are always unintended consequences if you try to rush something through. But I think something worth at least taking a look at and considering. So at any rate, that was my one question. The next question I have, are there any other colleges with which we have overlapping agreements? I know we mentioned Rio Hondo. Were there any others in the service area that are overlapping?
Pasadena City College has dual staff. Well, those are the only two that we both have agreements with. Okay. And this is another point of discussion moving forward because those agreements are already made. And I would hope that, I think those tend to be on the cusp where there's overlap in Metro and Foothill Transit services. So that's understood. But as we move forward with this program, what I foresee here is an issue of equity because the colleges that are fully in respective areas, they're just paying, one agreement to be able to have all of this. And my sense is probably Rio Hondo then in Pasadena, those students are paying a little bit more for the same thing that other colleges and other students are probably, just entering into one agreement and paying, one fee for. Maybe I'm wrong in that perception, but if I'm not, that may be something that needs to be looked at and fairly addressed. No, actually, we have taken that into consideration, and we all have been working very closely with that. So Metro bills Rio Hondo for Metro's boardings and the other transit agencies under UPass, but not Foothill. And Foothill bills for their boardings only. So it actually ends up being approximately the same cost because I believe, Michelle, the reimbursement rate under ClassPass is still 75 cents. Is it still the same as Metro's?
The reimbursement is half of our current local fare, right? John's eyes here. Did I get that right, John?
Yeah, you're correct. And our reimbursement rate for ClassPass program is 87.5 cents.
Okay. So I guess they're actually paying a little bit less for Metro and other transit agencies, but only slightly. But the agreements are set up so that they're not being double charged. They're basically, instead of paying one amount to one agency, they're paying, but they're just two different separate.
Well, no, I mean, but maybe I misunderstood, but I thought each agency may have a student fee internally. So if they're paying $5 to Foothill Transit, for example, and $5 to Metro, but then you have maybe Mount Sac in our district that just has a $5. And I'm just pulling these numbers out of the air, so they may not be accurate. But are they paying double the student fee because they're in two agreements versus Mount Sac?
No, Rio Hondo students pay $9 a term, and then each of our agencies bills them based on the actual boarding. So we're not billing them student fee, we're billing them based on the boardings, but they use the money they collect from the student fee to pay the invoices.
Okay, good. I just wanted to verify that. Yes, I'm sorry.
I believe Mount Sac, the fee is also $9. So, the challenging thing with all of the programs is if you look at each one of our ClassPass agreements, they're pretty similar, but each one is a little bit different. And to Devin's point, I think when you really get down to it, it's really pennies on the ride that you're talking about. There are not huge differences between the various programs. Again, the colleges that are in those kind of overlap areas, the structure is different, but when you get down to the overall fee, it's comparable. And $9, in our case, the $9 fee that a Mount Sac student pays gets them a monthly pass that's worth, John, 70 something dollars a month when you figure a class Silver Streak pass in. So it's John, you're muted. So it's a great deal for the students, and it's a great way to promote mobility in education.
And on the note where Doran brought up and said we're looking at we're kind of rethinking and looking at all of our fares with the goal of simplicity. We want to try to reduce the complications around, well, if you're riding this bus, it's this fare. If you're riding that bus, it's that fare. That's one of our goals for this year. And we're working actually with the COA that the planning department is managing. We're working with those consultants also to get some feel for what the passengers are looking for, as well as what other transit agencies are doing.
And that's a great thing. I appreciate knowing that. But in this case, like I said, what I was just focusing on was with regards to, now you put the $9 out there. I just want to make sure Mount Sac students weren't paying $9 and that Rio Hondo is paying $18 because they're paying $9 for the Metro program and $9 for our program. So as long as everybody's, in the same situation, that's all I just wanted to assure. I would agree. I just want to, pass along, my same feeling as member Shevlin in regards to the way we categorize K through 12. I think it just kind of at some point makes more sense to say, riders under the age of 18 are free, because even for that matter, my understanding is the general public transit services are not intended as school bus services. So I think putting the K through 12 in there kind of convolutes things and maybe a slippery slope in the long run if that's not really a service that public transit agencies are supposed to be providing related to schools. I guess the only other concern I would have, and is there anything that assures, that if you do open it up to younger riders, that those that are within this age group there's some understanding that parents are responsible, and if their children are riding alone, I'd just be a little concerned about liability, because we all know how that works. If a child ends up on your bus and there's no guardian there, and something happens, then we're all liable and we're deep pockets. So I guess putting that out as you're going through this as well, there needs to be some careful thought as to no good deed goes unpunished. You want to encourage young people to get used to riding the bus. And give them opportunities, but we also don't want to be in a situation where we end up with a big lawsuit because a child didn't have a guardian there, and yet it's still our responsibility that we had a young person on there that was that got hurt. So that's one thing also that I would mention. And then even again, going back to kind of the equity issue I brought up with the colleges, I think we also need to be careful if you do even there, as much as it's not really for us to be providing service directly to schools. If you do have schools participating, I think, we have one-time monies that you point out that can at least serve as seed money to get this going. But in the long run, if the expectation is that, schools should help, put some money back in, there needs to be assure that everybody's paying their share, even if some schools for, economic reasons, income reasons of students, there's a subsidy that should be reported accordingly, that school gets a grant, so that when it comes down to it, everybody's reported as paying in, not where some schools then are, getting away with paying nothing and others are, regardless of, the demographics of that school, if you will. So I think that's something in terms of, even what I'm getting to with regards to equity that needs to be fairly given thought to. So
okay. I have two answers for you. So one is that, yes, we have also been concerned about the liability issue. And so the way that we're rolling these out is that, well, for one, you notice that I did not call it a free student program, because only the students at schools who are participating in the cost sharing as partners will be receiving these passes. And part of that reason is because we need to have a distribution method where we can assure that each student gets a card, each student in the district or each student at that school gets a card. And then we are setting up a streamlined registration portal for that card where the parents will be required to go onto that portal, put in the card number, put in a code to load that pass, and then check a box that says they understand that their student can use this card to travel around LA County, so that we're really clear that the parent was involved in this process, right? We're not just handing a 6-year-old a tap card and saying, have fun. So that's something that we really have put a lot of thought into in terms of the process as we roll things out. And then also, in terms of the pricing structure, the $3 per student, we put a lot of thought into that as well. And we know already that schools are required under the McKinney-Vento Act to pay fees for the transportation costs for their homeless students, their foster youth. There's also requirements for them to provide transportation for special ed. There's also some money available for students that are transitioning out of juvenile court schools or juvenile detention back into regular schools. So there are funds available for schools to pay for these programs, at least to cover those portions of students that are covered under those programs, which makes the amount of money that they would have to pay to include their other students even less. So for the most part, we've heard from 42 districts, and only 2 of them said that they are not planning on participating because of budgetary reasons. And as you mentioned, we are still looking for additional funding, like grant funding or philanthropic funding, to help those schools who may not be able to afford to participate in the program for, lack of funding. So we are. I just want you to know that we are looking at all of those things. Those are big issues that have come up. And I think we've talked about this in our weekly ad hoc committee as trying to boil the ocean, right? There's so many issues that are affect these programs, but we really are trying to take a hard look and come up with some smart solutions to address those issues. And also, I just want to go back to the example about Mount SAC also paying $9. Currently, Mount SAC students pay the $9 and they get boardings on Foothill Transit. But if Foothill Transit opts into the regional FSI program, then for that same $9 fee, they would get service on Foothill Metro and all of the other participating FSI agencies as well. So that is going to provide a better level of equity for community college students specifically, because right now, some of the community college students that are on the UPass, they have Metro and 9 other agencies right now, whereas the community colleges that have agreements with individual transit agencies are only getting service on that transit agency. So we are trying to make everything a little bit more even throughout the county.
That part I understood. I just wanted to make sure that for all things being equal, that Mount SAC students were paying the same student fee as Rio Hondo. That they're not paying $18 for the same service versus they pay $9 for that same offering. Right. So that was really the main issue. I understood the other, and thank you for that.
Okay, I can't see raised hands, so just chime in.
I'll let Jerry go.
Okay, thanks, Becky. A couple of questions I have. Most of my questions have been answered, but Ms. Michelle or Doran, have we figured out what the cost would be to Foothill Transit? Do we have an estimate as to how many riders might qualify for the program and what the actual cost could be to us, bottom line?
Well, by using our previous year data is the way we did the estimates. So, again, this is John's area of expertise, but he did text me. And so we believe for FY22, the cost to Foothill Transit for both, for the K through 12 primarily, would be approximately $900,000, $800,000 to $900,000. But that is, again, so John, that's based on prior year data. It's not a forecast for the current year, right, John?
Right. That's based on the FY19 data, which is a full year of regular service.
Right. So it actually, that's our worst case scenario, that it could cost us approximately $800,000 to $900,000.
And I guess another way to say that is that in the pre-pandemic days, we would collect approximately $900,000 in revenue from these categories. If we participated in the program and we had the same ridership level, we wouldn't recognize that revenue. Now, if ridership goes up, that's also revenue that we wouldn't recognize. But from a bottom line standpoint, that's roughly the number you're looking at.
Thanks, Doran. That's good.
And then I guess that would be my next question, and it's impossible to answer, but get out your crystal balls and, do we have any idea or any projections as to what this might do to increase ridership? Because, anything that we do should increase ridership, and our goal, public transportation's goal, is not to be profitable. It's just not what we do. It's to get people off of the road and help our residents get from one place to the other. But are there any projections or any examples in other cities or other communities that might be able to show what a program like this may increase our ridership?
One thing I could say is the current fare sale that we're doing has had dramatic impact on Foothill Transit's revenue collection. And I think also on the ridership, but you're going to hear about that, I think, a little later in the meeting. So in our experience, doing these kinds of outreach programs to the community do improve transit ridership. Doran, you want to go further than that?
I was just going to say, Gary, the short answer to your question is no, we don't have a clue.
We do.
Well,
I think the challenge right now is there are so many moving parts coming out of the pandemic. Ridership patterns are changing. Our fare sale, when you all approve that, I forecasted that something would happen, and some of it would be attributed to the fare sale. And you all would ask me, well, how much impact did the fare sale have? And I would say, well, I don't know, some. It's hard to separate out, what's going to happen coming out of the pandemic versus what happens with a program like this. I think at the end of the day, our goal is to create more mobility for as many people as we can in as many ways as we can. We'll do our best to try to suss out the impact of this program versus others. But that's the challenge. Our crystal ball is not working well.
And to train these young people to be future transit riders. 20 years from now, that will be when we'll know the impact of this program. Devin, you had a comment?
Yeah, pandemic aside, we do have some pretty good examples of other areas that have implemented a free student program or fareless student program. So even LADOT launched a fareless program similar to this in fall of 2019, and they saw their student ridership double in the months before the pandemic. So that was about 8 months they had before the pandemic hit from it hit right after they launched. But in that time, they saw their ridership double for students specifically. And then also in Sacramento, they started a similar program in Sacramento a few years back, and they saw the same result, that student ridership doubled when it became free.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thanks. That's all I had.
Okay, anyone else?
Go ahead. Go ahead and say it now.
Okay. Okay. I just wanted to go back, and I don't mean to belabor at this point. I do agree definitely with Corey regarding the consistency of fares across the board, especially with our college passes and all that. But going back to the K through 12, I'm not here to represent a school district, but I just don't see where there is a real advantage to the school districts. And is it made clear to them that we are not in any way, shape, or form taking over in any way the delivery of children to and from school, and that it is very clear? I know you said they had to check boxes or fill out forms and waivers and things like that, but they do know that the children have to be accompanied by an adult. I know that Monrovia, when they had, at the beginning, when we had our Lyft program and all the rides were 50 cents, there were a lot of parents that were sticking their kids in a Lyft car. That wasn't legal, but they were sticking their kids in a Lyft ride for 50 cents to get them to school. And so that's a huge liability. And I know then, talking to Doran, we are actually precluded from doing bus service for school delivery. So I just want, like I said, I'm not here to represent a school district, but I just want to know, and again, maybe that's where the name of this pass, saying K through 12 really is not the best way to market it. I just want to make it very clear that we aren't trying to take over school bus delivery.
Yeah, that's clear when we meet with the school districts. And for the most part, the school districts that have school bus delivery, they don't have any intention of changing that. They're very proud of their internal services and they want to maintain them. What I was mentioning in terms of the funding amounts that are available, those are costs that the school districts are currently paying right now for those students, but they're paying $24 per student per month for those services. So what we're trying to get school districts to look at is, number one, what is it costing you right now to provide those services for that small number of students? And can you take that same amount of funding, shift it into this program, but now it covers all of the students who are interested in riding transit. So we're trying to look at it. I mean, and that's specifically where the $3 came from, is we were trying to look at the money that the schools are already spending and to not increase their costs significantly, but just really to increase the reach of the program, right? By being able to use a similar amount of money to, instead of just serving that small group of students, serve all of their students. I
would just definitely rebrand it, because from the outside saying K through 12, it sounds more like a school bus delivery system. And that's not what the goal is here. And it's exciting to educate and get kids used to using transit, but at the same time, educating parents as well that this isn't a pass to throw your little kid on a bus and have a good time. So
understood.
Right.
Yeah.
Devin, if I could just say though, if you do partner with school districts, the school district is going to communicate that message that it is a student, a program to get students to school.
Most of the districts are not interested in using it specifically to get students to school. We're hearing that loud and clear from them. And we will be providing them with all of the marketing materials to provide to their families. So we've been working with them to determine all the different ways they communicate, including a parent portal or text messaging or, social media or just regular hard mail, flyers, whatever that is. We've been working with the districts to determine what are all the ways that you communicate with your families, and so that we can craft ready-made messages for them to send out so that we're not adding to the administrative burden of school districts, but we're also communicating a message that like, hey, this is a new benefit that can help you get around LA County.
What is the age limit on both Metro and Foothill for riding alone, unaccompanied?
For Metro, it's 13. 13 and over can ride unaccompanied.
What is it for Foothills? Is it the same?
I'm kind of looking to Kevin here to see if he knows, because I'm not sure I know.
I will have to look. I will have to look that up.
Well,
John,
yeah, and that should be consistent as well. But like I said, even though we made it very clear that minors were not to be using the LIFT program, it definitely was happening. And so there's really should not be any messaging from school districts that this is a program to get your children to school unless they are over the age, riding age.
Yeah. Well, and Becky, your question gets to the pages and pages of fare regulations that we have in our bus book, which is kind of the topic of our next discussion item. But yeah, making this stuff simple and easy for the community to understand, it definitely, I think, should be our goal.
Yeah.
It's way complicated.
Are bus drivers encouraged to ask children that look younger than a certain age about whether or not they, are
What age
with
they are?
Yes. Do we just let anybody on the bus right now?
That's a tough question.
Well, on the passes, could you have, for if it's being distributed through schools, could there be a special marking on the card indicating that they're old enough to ride by themselves. They can be unaccompanied. I would think that would be a possible solution for that. I don't think it would be widespread, but you wouldn't want to encourage then the boarding of a lot of minors or groups of kids. They're pretty sophisticated, and they could get together and decide to go as a group somewhere. And, you know, maybe they don't have mom or dad to take them somewhere. Hey, we can go on the bus. So you got a group of 10-year-olds or something.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good idea about a sticker or marking for the older versus younger. We'll definitely take that back.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
What is the timing in terms of the need to sign on to this program? I mean, the college program I'm much more comfortable with. It, you know, the funding is there. We're dealing with you know, mostly adults that are responsible for themselves. You know, this other program, what is the urgency, I guess I should say, to join this sooner rather than later?
Well, we are beginning our rolling implementation now with those 6 districts that I mentioned a little bit earlier. And so right now we have 4 transit agencies other than Metro. So Metro and 4 other transit agencies that are committed to rolling out in August. And then we're happy to add transit agencies as other agencies decide to come into the program. And the only challenge that really poses for us, like, we're okay with all of the back end programming, the TAP and fare boxes and all of that. We just want to make sure that in terms of messaging, that we're letting students know when new services become available. So we did a similar thing with the UPass program. We launched it in 2016. We launched it with only 4 schools and only Metro. And then as we continue to move forward in the pilot period, we added schools, we added transit agencies. So now we're over 20 schools and, you know, the Metro and 9 other agencies. So we're using a similar process in this new program where we're going to roll out now with what we have. And then we're happy to add additional districts and additional transit agencies as we move forward.
I think an additional answer to that question, Corey, is they have a waiver from the Federal Transit Administration to allow an 18-month pilot. As you know, pilots are generally only approved for 6 months. So this one happens to be 18 months. But once the clock starts ticking, once they roll things out, then the clock starts ticking on the FTA approval of doing a pilot. Additionally, we learned last week that we would need to do our own Title VI analysis or apply for an FTA waiver as well. So that is, if you direct us to go forward today, that's something that we would have to get started on right away, was to request an FTA waiver for the pilot.
The waiver, yes. The Title VI analysis doesn't need to be done until the end of the pilot period when we're determining that it would go beyond a pilot. Then the Title VI analysis would need to be done and approved by each agency's board in order to create an ongoing program, basically, right? But waiver, Michelle's right, the waiver is a requirement. So your agency would need to submit a letter to the FTA to get the approval for the 18-month pilot. And I've provided the templates for those letters and our approval from the FTA so that agencies can include that when they request. And the FTA is aware that this is happening. So it shouldn't be, they're telling us it should really only be like a 2-month turnaround time to get those waivers approved, as long as the agencies are saying, you know, that the purpose of the approval is to participate in this regional program. It shouldn't be an issue.
Thank you.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I guess I just have some comments. First, I do want to acknowledge, you know, what Member Boyer said with regards to, you know, public transit isn't here to make money. It's actually a loss type of operation, but you know, there's reason for it, and I'll illustrate that perhaps in a larger way than what Member Boyer did by making the point that years ago I was in traffic court and there was another person that was before the judge that had missed a previous appearance before the judge, and the judge asked her, you know, why she missed the appearance, and she mentioned that she didn't have a ride. and the judge snapped at her, "Haven't you heard of the bus?" So that is the intention of bus services, is to assure that, even people who don't have transit have the opportunity to have a means of getting to a place, even with low income. That's where the bus comes in. The other challenge we have in Southern California, of course, is that we have a car culture. And part of this, trying to get young people, as was stated, to get them on the bus, is to start getting them comfortable with using public transit and having them recognize that is an option. That said, the one other challenge we have in Southern California is that we're very spread out, and it's very hard for our transit lines to get people everywhere they need to go, in some cases without an extensive walk. Now, that may be a good thing, because we point out that's why people who ride transit, particularly in Southern California, tend to be probably healthier, because they've got a hike to go with their bus ride. But that becomes problematic, especially when you're talking about people with disabilities. Trying to get them places easily, that makes it more challenging. And so the other problem too, though, is when we're kind of making choices here. Even there, are we going to put what limited resources we have into free fares, or what limited resources we have into trying to expand services to get people to more places where they need to go? There's a balance there, and that's equally of concern, I guess. It's also, related to the liability, and the point that Member Shevlin made about, even how, as much as you'd expect even the adults to make wise decisions, they do things anyway. And then, then when things don't go right, they want to blame somebody else. And then, as a government agency, we're the ones who end up with the lawsuit and the blame. I guess right now, this good intentions don't always make good policy. And sometimes we need to be a little more cautious, as we go through. And I guess on this one, I'm kind of feeling that I'd rather see how this goes with, Metro's a large agency, for them to kind of start this and see how it goes before I jump on with the under the age of 18 program, whatever that ends up being categorized as. But I really, feel too, if it's not, there's going to be an equity issue in the long run. If it's not a mandated program, a lot of folks are not going to, opt in. Not to mention, we haven't even touched on private schools. If we're giving it to all young people and we're categorizing it along the lines of schools, there are schools that are potentially, that are going to get away with not paying anything, and then that's not really fair either. So. I guess I'd feel more comfortable on that program, seeing how it goes. And if it's, if it seems to have promise, then certainly we can sign on later. I don't see the urgency on that one. The college program, on the other hand, like I said, there's we already have established agreements. It's been proven to be a very good program. Now, SAC in particular has been a very successful student program for us. And to provide the opportunity to expand that, I think, is a great thing. So I'm supportive of that at this moment, but I don't feel comfortable with the other program at this point in time. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Cynthia, I think we've talked about this. I'm ready to make a motion if everyone is okay. And I'd like to move that we instruct staff to go ahead and execute an MOU with Metro for the UPass program, but we continue to investigate and watch the K-12 program, and we can discuss that at a future date.
I'll second that.
And Gary, just so we're clear on the motion, excuse me, and we didn't include this in the staff recommendation, but would your motion be to participate in the UPass for all of our fare categories except our express routes? That would make it consistent with our ClassPass program.
Yes.
That would be my recommendation. I just wanted to verify. That
excluding the Silver Streak, correct, Doran?
No, the Silver Streak would be included as an
correct.
Just it would mirror ClassPass exactly. So
okay.
the benefits that a ClassPass rider had, we would offer that as part of the UPass program. Again, consistency across our categories.
Okay. Yes, that's my motion.
Okay, perfect.
This is
Devin. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Devin.
No, just for clarification, we do have two separate FSI agreements. So one for community college and getting the community colleges into that program, and a separate agreement for FSI K-12. So I just want to make sure that the intent, if you mean it, is to also cover participation in FSI community college.
Just understand that.
Okay, yeah,
Daryl,
I don't understand.
Explain that a little.
the difference.
Yeah.
So that's the option for schools like Mount Sac to get a regional pass under FSI.
And Devin, I've also gotten confused on this one. If we did FSI for the community colleges,
Yes.
what is the economic impact to Foothill Transit? I don't think there's much of any, but I'm not.
If anything, it would be positive because
Right.
it wouldn't affect your existing financial agreements with your existing schools. Everything with your existing schools would stay the same. We would just be helping you use a regional pass instead of a Foothill pass for those schools like Mount Sac. But then also our financial office has committed to whatever new money we get in from new community colleges in the FSI program. For instance, we're working with Cerritos College to get them into the FSI program. Then there will at some point be some revenue sharing for those additional funds. We're not entirely sure what that will look like yet because we need to know how many schools and how many transit agencies. Probably would be based on some level of participation, but that would be new money as well. So there would be no financial loss to participate in FSI Community College. There could be the potential for a slight bump in revenue up.
But at a minimum, our current class pass riders would get access to the metro system.
Yes.
And not pay additional fares. So
yeah, and other
not just Metro, right? All the others.
Exactly.
Yeah,
all the participating agencies.
So I mean, this is a poor analogy, I'm sure, but I kind of almost view this as sort of getting a free dessert at your favorite restaurant. You know, we're sort of getting a little extra without our students get a little extra without having to have to incur any cost.
A great analogy.
Okay. And so again, I apologize. This has been kind of squirrely because as you see, it's a multi-layered cake here. But again, Gary, if you included that in your motion, I certainly would have my recommendation to do that on the community college program, because again, as you heard, it's an added benefit to our current class pass participants in that they could also access the metro system, and other systems, which would be great.
Okay, so if I need to amend my motion, I want to be clear. So I'd like to make the motion to include the community colleges in the MOU with Metro.
Actually, I think the way it will work is if you would approve item 1, execute an MOU for the UPass program, and then on item 2, we're going to continue to study. However, you can direct us to do a FSI agreement with Metro for community colleges only.
Yeah, there you go.
And if I was the seconder, I'll accept the amendment.
Or if I was, then I also accept it. It's a team effort here. Team effort.
We're so agreeable.
A roll call vote, please.
And can I just make one clarification? This motion is not directing anything about the K through 12, right? We're going to do that in a separate motion. Is that it?
Well,
correct.
I would prefer we did that.
Okay, great.
Is that correct, Gary?
Yeah, I guess.
I don't think that's what Michelle said. Michelle was talking, we would continue to study the other. Was that not correct,
Yeah.
Michelle?
Okay.
Correct. The K through 12 part, we will continue to study.
Okay.
Devin, can I ask that as soon as you get some information back regarding putting a possible sticker with the age requirement, I'd be more inclined to, hopefully down the road support that, initiative. So if you could come back to us as soon as you can, because I know you're, as Michelle said, are on a time constraint as far as having the pilot go. And, you don't want to join on 3 months before the pilot ends. And then, well, what are those statistics like for the agency? So if you could get back to us, I think that's my biggest concern with moving that forward right now.
I think, yeah, Cynthia, I think the idea, the liability concerns were on everyone's mind, as well as the name change as far as the program.
Right.
I liked Michelle's when she threw out future transit riders. Maybe somebody makes changes to that.
Right.
But is it possible to actually put the motion on the screen so we're 100% sure what we're voting on?
You
Sabrina?
need the revised motion or the one that's currently there?
Do you want to separate the motions, Gary?
Okay, maybe we should do that. So I would like to amend my motion to instruct staff to execute an MOU with LA Metro to include Foothill Transit and the College UPass program, including community colleges.
And if I'm the seconder, I'll accept that.
And likewise.
Does that work?
Sabrina,
I need to make a clarification. It actually, there would be two agreements, Gary.
Right.
Okay, so there'd be an agreement with the UPass and then a second agreement that we would execute with the FSI community colleges.
Correct. Okay, I think I understand now, because the K-12 and the community colleges were two FSIs that were together. Is that what's happening here?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
Poor wording in the board report.
So the first motion is what Gary would just be number one, I think. And then you would be a second motion that separated the two FSIs from K-12 and community college, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So
anybody?
we're doing the UPass MOU, the community college fareless agreement. Those you're directing us to go forward with. And then the third piece is to continue to study and evaluate the student pass program and come back to you at a future meeting for more discussion.
The K through 12.
Well, K through 12, yeah.
Doran, can we put a time frame on the comeback? Because sometimes comeback goes on and on and on and on. Not just, I'm not talking about Foothill Transit in particular, but it can. So maybe we can say come back within 3 months with more information.
Oh yeah, I mean we can come back every month.
Okay, if you want to, that's good.
Michelle and Devin and I have been hanging out a lot talking about all this stuff. So
go for it.
we can certainly come back. And again, I think, as you've seen, this is a multi-layered, complicated effort. Trying to unravel it all has been challenging. And I do think that, we cover a lot of school systems here in our service area. So when we look at the K-12 piece of the pie, there are other partners that we certainly can have weigh in. I know that the Duarte Unified School District has opted to not participate. I've talked to the superintendent of the Pomona Unified School District, which is probably our biggest school district, and he was actually interested in the program. So again, there's a lot more discussion to be had. And as you've pointed out, a lot more details still that we need to work through to get to a good spot. Not that we're not a good spot now, but.
Okay, so I think we have direction. Devin, thank you so much.
Welcome.
We need a vote.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. We had a motion and a second, correct?
Yes.
So we need a roll call vote.
Member Moss,
Yes.
Member Shevlin,
Yes.
Member Boyer,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kalaikai,
Yes.
Chair Sternquist.
Yes. Okay, we have direction.
Thank you all for taking the time to wade through this. The intentions are great. The details are complex. And Devin, thanks for joining us today. You'll be back.
Yes, I will. Happy to come back whenever you want an update.
Thank you.
Thank you, Devin.
Thank you.
Okay, we move to item 7, Silver Streak Fare Structure Evaluation and Alternative Consideration. And John is with us, our revenue manager, and he will be making this presentation.
Yeah, so another fair topic. Good morning, Chair Sternquist and the members of the Executive Board. This morning, I'd like to share some background related to our fare structure on a Silver Streak service and seek guidance from the board on further potential studies and options. On the next slide. So in 2007, Foothill Transit first introduced the Silver Streak service that travels along the Interstate 10 highway between Montclair Transit Center and downtown Los Angeles. The Silver Streak service serves several major transit hubs, including El Monte Station and Pomona Transit Center. With its popularity, LA Metro then later launched their J-Line service, formerly known as the Silver Line, in 2009 that overlaps the western part of the Silver Streak segment from El Monte Station to downtown LA, but it travels a little further south to San Pedro. In 2012, both Foothill Transit and LA Metro launched the Silver to Silver program, which allowed both agency fares and passes to be valid on either service on the same corridor between El Monte Station and downtown LA. Since then, both agencies have changed their fares, resulting in a further deviation from the original Silver to Silver program. Next slide. The Silver Streak service is one of the most popular service among Foothill Transit portfolio of service. The ridership on the Silver Streak consistently makes up more than 9% of the total ridership, and during the initial months of the pandemic, the ridership on the Silver Streak made up more than 11% of the total ridership. Since the start of the pandemic, the Silver Streak average monthly boarding is 39,000 rides compared to 96,000 average monthly boardings before the pandemic. In terms of revenue, the Silver Streak generated $1.83 million in fare revenue in FY19, $1.4 million in FY20, and in FY21, given that fares were suspended for 4 months, it generated around $500,000. Next slide. From the farebox data, majority of the customers on the Silver Streak service pays for the fare with either cash or tap store value. That's roughly 60% of the ridership on the Silver Streak pays for a single ride fare. And only around 7% of the fare transaction uses a Foothill Transit Pass. Prior to the pandemic, Foothill Transit Pass usage accounts for more than 11% of the total fare transactions. The 60% single ride fare, which is cash and store value, accounts for 92% of the fare revenue generated from the Silver Streak. The other remaining fare revenue are generated through pass reimbursement programs such as Access Services, Easy Pass, MetroLink, transfers, and Class Pass program at a reduced rate. Next slide. So in addition to being the most popular service, the Silver Streak has the most complex fare structure. In fact, there are 2 fare settings on the fare box for the Silver Streak Silver Streak service. One setting covers the Silver to Silver corridor on the western part of the route from El Monte Station to downtown LA, and the other fare setting is for the eastern part of the route from El Monte to Montclair Transit Center. They both have different upcharges, zone requirements, and pass eligibility. From the initial data we collected after fare collection was resumed in October of last year, fare payment behaviors seems to have changed where pass usage has dropped and single ride fares seem to have gained popularity. We don't currently have enough usage data from a recent summer sale, and customers' payment behavior might have shifted as a result of the fare sale. When comparing base fare with LA Metro, Metro's base fare on the J line is 25 cents less than our tap base fare on the Silver Streak. With a price difference, a single ride fare paying customer who may be price sensitive may choose to ride Metro's J line as opposed to our Silver Streak if their choice permits. Also, by paying the Metro base fare, the customer is eligible for unlimited transfer within the Metro system for 2 hours. So this further incentivizes single ride fare paying customers to ride Metro's J-Line service than our Silver Streak. Next slide. So another comparable Metro service that operates within our service area is the L line, formerly known as the GO line. The fare structure on the GO line is the same as Metro's local bus service at $1.75 base fare and has the same type of passes as the local service. So which means that there are no upcharges or different pass requirements for a Metro customer transferring to the L line from the local bus service. However, the Silver Streak operates on a different fare structure than our local service, and customers are currently required to pay an upcharge or use a higher tier pass when they transfer. The L line and the Silver Streak travels in the same direction, with the L line serving the upper portion of the San Gabriel Valley along the 210, and the Silver Streak serving the central part of the valley along the I-10. And they will eventually share the same terminus. The L line currently ends by Citrus College in the city of Glendora, but it will eventually be extended to Montclair Transit Center, and that's where our Silver Streak terminus is at. The Silver Streak fare structure is complex. It's not as accommodating to our frequent customer, and it's not priced competitively with other comparable service. So therefore, a thorough review of the Silver Streak fare structure is needed. Next slide. So with that, the recommendation before you is to provide direction to staff to further study alternative fare structure options on the Silver Streak service for consideration and adoption.
Thank you, John. Do we have any public comment, Christina?
Madam Chair, there are no requests to speak.
Okay, do we have any board members' comments or questions?
I agree. Study it.
Is that a motion?
I agree.
I don't think we need one, but.
Yeah, Madam Chair, if I could, perhaps the concept, and I think the Silver Streak illustrates the complexity of the fare structure. Certainly studying the Silver Streak, we think it's worthy and important to do that. You might also direct us to look at our entire fare structure, because I do think there are other places where we could look at regional partners, with Metro certainly being our largest, to see if there's ways that we can streamline the structure to better serve the community.
I think that's a good idea, and I don't think anyone on our board would object to having more information, Doran.
We'll do that.
Great,
and
yeah.
I sense a study session in your future. I'm just sensing
We'll be there.
Let's do it.
There's a price to pay for this recommendation.
Yes. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Okay, item 8, electric bus program. And Roland, Director of Maintenance and Vehicle Technology, will make this presentation. Good morning, Roland. Roland is off with John from Proterra, I think.
Here he comes.
Good morning, Chair Circus and members of the executive.
Morning.
How are you all today?
Good, thank you.
As you all know, we've been operating, next slide. As you all know, we've been operating battery electric buses for 11 years now, starting back in September of 2010, with 3 35-foot fast charge Proterra buses. These initial buses, along with 2 overhead charging stations at the Pomona Transit Center, were funded with the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act funds, and were the very first Proterra fast charge battery electric buses deployed in transit service. Next slide, please. Our fleet size grew over time to eventually 32 battery electric buses, with 13 35-foot and 2 40-foot early model fast charge Proterras operated from our Pomona facility. The second set of battery electric buses were funded from the Federal Transit Administration's Transit Investments in Greenhouse Gas and Energy Reduction Grant Funds, commonly known as TIGR. And these are a demonstration program through FTA's Research, Demonstration, and Innovation Office. These were intended to implement new strategies for reducing greenhouse gas emissions and reduce energy use within a transit operations. In 2017 and 2018, we added 14 new model 40-foot E2 and 3 35-foot E2 extended range buses operated from our Arcadia Irwindale facility. Next slide, please. Our experience of operating battery electric buses were favorable during the early years. Bus availability goal was 85%, while the battery electric buses were at 83%. In 2014, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, commonly known as NREL, was contracted by the California Air Resources Board to evaluate the performance of our fleet of battery electric buses against our fleet of compressed natural gas buses. NREL's evaluation ran from April 2014 through December of 2020. Next slide, please. During that time, NREL noticed the steady decline of the bus's availability starting in 2017 and continued through their evaluation into 2020. Although the buses experienced some issues with energy storage systems, electric drive systems early on the evaluation, significantly more problems arose with the systems throughout 2019 and early 2020. There were also bus maintenance issues identified during the evaluation that were not related to bus propulsion systems, such as low voltage battery replacements, brakes, HVAC, and door closures. The miles between road calls during NREL's evaluation period for the 35 fast-charge battery electric bus was 5,680 miles, compared to about 25,000 miles for our CNG buses. Next slide, please. As you can see on the screen before you, since 2019, the battery electric bus out of service ranged from 30% to as high as 67%. This had an impact on spare CNG buses that can be deployed on other routes, which also increased the cost of maintaining CNG buses by our contractor, Keolis. The dotted red line is the target line of 85% availability, while the light green represents the battery electric bus percent availability. Next slide, please. The slide before you is a recent chart from our service contractor, Keolis, showing the miles between road calls for the month of June. And it's extremely low at 2,227 miles compared to 14,596 miles of the Pomona Yard CNG fleet. Next slide, please. So for the last 2 months, over 50% of battery electric buses were out of service. Some buses have been out of service for extended period as far as 275 days waiting for a part. In addition to mechanical problems, we've been faced with fit and finish issues with plastic interior panels, front wheel well cabinets, and driver bulkheads that have deformed due to exposure to heat and sunlight. Parts availability is a big issue as well. We consistently experience parts delays for our old and newer electric buses. Seems that parts orders usually source and filled directly from suppliers instead of Proterra stock inventory, which contributes to the delay in the delivery of the parts. Since the battery electric buses are now out of warranty, repair costs related to advanced technology parts can be expensive. Next slide, please. Proterra's proprietary blade charging system, which we use at our Pomona Transit Center and the Azusa Intermodal Transit Center, is no longer the preferred overhead charging system in the transit industry. The SAE J3105 pantograph overhead charge system is now the accepted standard. In addition, parts for these early generation vehicles and chargers are becoming difficult to obtain. In light of this, it may be prudent to seek the early retirement of this subfleet. Early retirement can be achieved via administrative or legislative pathways. To explain that better, I'd like to hand over the mic to our Chief Executive Officer, Doran Barnes, to explain that process. Doran?
Thank you, Roland. This has certainly been an interesting project as we have moved through its life. And I was thinking about this a little bit. The analogy that I often think of related to our electric vehicle program is, it's similar to the cell phone devices that we all use. And, I think back to when I was a kid, the telephone repair person came out and wired the phone into grandma's wall, and that phone sat on the kitchen counter for 20 years and worked, and it made basic phone calls and it did its thing. I just got a new phone this week that is 5G compatible, that I understand has more computing power than was used to send people to the moon. My point being that the technology has improved at a pace that has been unprecedented in prior times, but it's the technology evolution that we're living with today. Our first electric buses were literally the first fast charge heavy duty buses to be deployed in North America. And testing that technology, learning from that technology has proven to be beneficial not only to us, but to the entire industry. We've learned a lot of things in terms of what works. We've learned many things in terms of what isn't working. In some respects, again, going back to my telephone analogy, the electric buses are kind of like the old flip phones, the old flip cell phones. They did the job. They were pretty basic. But if you had to find a part to fix your old flip phone today, we'd be pretty hard pressed to do it. And so as we look at this technology and the pace that technology is moving, these first generation buses are just really struggling. The funding guidelines don't really match up with that pace and change of technology. And one of the concepts that, and what we're putting forward here for, preliminary direction is, should we explore possible ways to retire these vehicles early? As Roland mentioned, that can be done through an administrative request to the FTA. That could be done through legislation. That can be done through economic means. Each of those routes have their challenges. And we don't have a recommended solution for that. We do believe that this is, it's not an issue that's unique to Foothill Transit, but because we were the first, we're encountering these challenges first. And we certainly would look to our other industry partners, transit operator partners, and zero emission vehicle manufacturers to work with us as we move this forward. You have all taken a very thoughtful approach in terms of balancing good use of the revenues and resources that we're entrusted with using to deliver to the community, and also understanding the need for technological evolution. And if folks hadn't been experimenting with these technologies, again, we wouldn't be advancing, the industry wouldn't be advancing to where it is. Again, this cell phone wouldn't exist. It didn't just magically happen. It happened through learning and evolution and growth and over time. And so that's really the position that we find ourselves facing. Again, this is this may be the other end of going first and being the pioneer and encountering things that others haven't yet, but it's a challenge. So what we're looking for today is again, just general direction to work on these things, come back with solutions. We don't have a signed, sealed, and delivered solution, but did want to get the issue and the discussion before you to get your general direction on how we might best proceed. I know that John Walsh is still with us. Sabrina, if we could bring John over for a moment. I believe John made most of his comments earlier. Here he comes. But John, I didn't know if you had anything you'd like to add at this point. Doran,
I would just like to say I gave some comments at the beginning of the board meeting. I do appreciate everyone allowing me to do that, and really those comments really go right in line with Roland's slides and everything you've said. The evolution is happening very fast. The technology has changed. When we look at the very first bus we built for Foothill Transit to the buses rolling off the assembly line today, they're vastly different. Back then, the buses would only go 30 miles. We had a test just this week in Santa Cruz where we went over Highway 17 to San Jose and back 6 times, and the bus traveled 290 miles. And you guys know that route's very treacherous and very hilly. So we were very pleased with that, Doran. And I think Alex Clifford, the CEO there, will tell you how excited he was about the results. But that's where technology is. It's that iPhone 12 that's in your hand versus the bag phone that we all had back in the early days. So we stand behind supporting Roland and his team. Parts are challenging. He is absolutely right about that. And our team is working very, very hard with Foothill Transit, with your teams, with your contractors, to make sure we keep the buses in service and increase the availability time. We're working very, very hard on that. But we remain committed, and we remain a part of this process that you'll go through with your fleet, and would like to be involved in it any way that we can. And I'm open to answer any questions for the board, if you guys would like to ask me anything.
Doran?
Cynthia, you're muted, Cynthia.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
she is. Go ahead, Cynthia. You're
Well,
still
You're
muted.
still muted.
And still muted.
Cynthia.
Maybe you should jump in, Becky.
Well, Corey, I think Corey started talking first.
I have a multitude of questions and comments probably. I guess, Doran, I would ask if you could elaborate a little bit on the process, or what, the options are as far as, what it means to seek early retirement of these buses, and what that would mean for us.
And can I add to that, because that's one of my questions as
Sure.
well. You mentioned the legislative fixes or whatever, and in the grant funding, then what were what are the demands of that original grant funding and the life of the buses? What does that mean in terms of early retirement?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and we do have Jan Powell, our advocate in Washington, with us, and Yoko, our new director of government relations. Congratulations, Yoko, on your promotion. They're both here with us as well. There are really a couple of avenues, and each one of them have different complications. One, the Federal Transit Administration has, since probably the day that grandma's phone got wired into the wall, have had a 12-year life cycle requirement for transit vehicles. And for traditional transit vehicles, that's proven to be an appropriate life cycle. When we look at new technology vehicles, that hard and fast rule becomes a bit more complicated. And as we've seen, the evolution of technology is going much, much faster. So one pathway is to ask the Federal Transit Administration to consider adjusting the life requirement for the vehicle. That would be the administrative route. The legislative route would be to seek language through some mechanism through Congress to adjust that same life cycle requirement. The third option would be to look at the remaining value after depreciation of the vehicles and figure out the cost benefit of taking that remaining value and somehow refunding, if you will, or reusing those dollars with a direct economic impact. And so the remaining value of the vehicles is approximately $5 million. We'd have to figure out, how does that $5 million remaining value of the grant essentially get repaid to the FTA, given that we didn't run out through its full 12-year useful life. Again, I can't tell you, we're still trying to work through the nuances of all of that. Jan, I don't know if you have any thoughts on those, but each one has their complications for sure. At the same time, the complication is that having a fleet that is not running at the level that's consistent with our remaining fleet presents a daily operating challenge, and that becomes a mission achievement issue.
Doran, well, then that would fall into the next category. And I'm sorry, Corey, I'm not trying to jump you there, but then that alternative in either recouping or getting these buses into some form of true operation, where is that line? It costs more to keep on trying to make them operative versus trying to get the early retirement.
Yeah, and I think we're still working through the analysis of costs in terms of what the additional costs are. Keolis is our key partner, and particularly our oldest fleet. And we can certainly bring that back to you. I don't have those numbers today, and we're still working through those in terms of what the additional cost and cost are. It's the oldest fleet, which are the buses operating out of our Pomona facility, have the worst reliability. Some of those costs we can identify readily. Some of them really trickle out into other parts of the system where you have fewer CNG buses available for maintenance. We're maintaining them properly, but it becomes trickier to make all of that happen given that you've got less of a buffer because you have more of the first generation electric buses unavailable. Now we're talking about 15 buses out of a fleet of Roland roughly 200. What do you have in Pomona right now?
Well, Pomona around 150.
150. So, we're making it work, but it does put pressure on the operation to accomplish all of
If you're trying to meet those guidelines and we don't get any relief under that, then on the other end, then we're just bleeding money trying to get these buses in operative condition. So yeah, we need some relief here.
Right.
I think a multi-tiered question, I think, guys.
Right.
I was going to say, I think a cost benefit analysis is very, very important here because it's not just, if the feds want the money back, it's not just that. You also have to buy new buses to backfill for the ones that you're taking offline.
Right.
But on the flip side of that, I understand, I'm pretty sure 291 is one of our busier routes. So, it's not necessarily a financial impact to us, but certainly for the riders, if buses don't show up, that's bad news for our customers who are reliant on the service. So again, we've got to really consider those things fairly to consider what's the least expensive to our taxpayers who fund us, but also considering what we said earlier about what the purpose is of public transit, that it needs to be efficient for people that have to get to court or get to work, to make sure that we're meeting those obligations as well. But I guess one thing that I would still say that should be pursued, in all fairness, this 12-year rule does seem unrealistic because, let's face it, with regards to most other technology, computers and that, my understanding is the depreciation rate is like roughly 3 years. There's a recognition that new technology is changing or technology in general is changing so quickly that you recognize that you have to depreciate it more quickly, and 12 years for this type of technology is not necessarily realistic. Another perhaps lesson learned, though, if you do have those types of requirements in a grant, is that we should expect that the person providing the equipment is going to guarantee it for the length of the depreciation period. So again, not to be a Monday morning quarterback, even from our last discussion, we're presented with these things and you try to do your best to judge what the best course of action is in terms of trying to meet your goal, in terms of being innovative and trying to be thoughtful about, how to improve things and make things better. And there are always hiccups in those things, but certainly when we run into things like this, there are definitely lessons to be learned. And if we can change this rule for the benefit of all agencies, but even beyond that, if we do have limitations like that in the future, assuring that our agreements, have some sort of a warranty that also covers the length of the agreement that we have with a grant that we're taking. So,
amen.
Amen.
If I could add on to what Corey was just saying. We got to remember that this is the mandate by the governor that we go to a zero emission bus fleet. It's something they came up with, and then they left it to all of us to try to figure out how to make it happen. And we knew going in that zero emission buses were going to be more expensive. They cost more money, but maybe that needs to be evaluated, because if the life of a zero emission bus is only 10 years and not 12 years, that adds on to the cost, and that's part of the experiment that Foothill undertook a number of years ago to try to figure this out. So if that is what the cost is going to be, we need to be realistic moving forward, that, to let everyone know that to meet this goal that was, put on our plate, it's going to cost this much extra money. So I just think we don't have a choice. I believe we have until 2040 for the entire state of California to have a zero emission bus fleet everywhere in the state. And so if the cost of that is not only going to be more expensive buses, but buses that only last 10 years instead of 12 years, the people making these decisions and the residents that voted for the people that are making these decisions need to understand that's what the cost is going to be to reach this goal. So that's just my thought.
One of the aspects, and you've probably heard me say on multiple forums, if we have this mandate in California and we have this goal at the national level, advancing this technology is going to require using the technology, learning from the technology, taking the lessons learned and advancing the technology. And in many respects, what you all have done with this particular first fleet is demonstrated that there was a technological solution that for the most part worked, but the economics behind it didn't work. And what I mean by that is that the notion of charging every approximately 2 hours, given the electric rate structure, just doesn't make good economic sense. Much better for us to have learned that in a fleet of 15 buses than if we had deployed a fleet of 300 buses and then figured that out. And that process has to continue itself as we ultimately get to that goal of a zero emission fleet. Again, you heard John say Proterra is not selling the technology that we're using on those first 12 buses based on the learnings that have been crafted from our activity. So, there are many aspects of how this program needs to continue to evolve. I think there's still learning that needs to be done and strategic investment that needs to be made at both the state and the federal level so that we don't deploy large scale fleets where we learn something and really determine, hey, that didn't work out. And now we've got 300 or 500 of these things that didn't work optimally. All of that is this iterative process. And you've heard John say they're now on their 5th generation. Other manufacturers are advancing through their generations of vehicles to get to what will ultimately be that robust state.
I think it's also important to point out, I personally was involved in an issue in which we were trying to put electric charging stations in a certain area, and the Edison infrastructure was not able to deliver enough electricity to that area. So as we are working on the actual vehicles that have to operate this, it's important to understand that there are a lot of people that are working on the infrastructure, and we're having a lot of hiccups there and trying to make sure that we have the ability to produce enough electricity and to deliver enough electricity to be able to make this happen. So, there's a lot of balls in the air right now, and mistakes are going to be made. We're going to have some hiccups, and we need to learn from that.
I want to follow up with Gary because, a big part of the problem here is, on higher levels of government, this cart before the horse, mentality, good intentions, but not well thought out in terms of the reality of implementation, like having a grant for technology that expects a 12-year life cycle. But even with regards to electricity, we see a lot of problems with that with the state, even in terms of, they want to move so quickly to the green energy, but they're taking, existing fossil fuel and other sources offline and not backfilling enough. Then we've got problems with the grid, and even it's wreaking havoc on the market, which then, it's the villains are the heroes. They're pushing people into poverty and then claiming to save them, but they're creating a lot of those issues. So, we're caught in the middle here, and Proterra, was there to help us start down this road. And 7 years, really, people can be upset, but 7 years is not that bad considering the use of our buses. Police vehicles, we generally change them out, in roughly a 5-year life cycle because they're so heavily used, and you want them to be reliable for your police to get to a call. And the same thing for this, public transit is important to a lot of people, as I've alluded to. And I don't think 7 years was really that bad. But, I recognize the challenge here. And again, if we can just have a cost benefit analysis to assure that our final decision is the most wise thing we can do, for the taxpayers of this agency, but also for our riders who are dependent on the service.
As well as a legislative fix. That's got to be addressed.
Right. Well, it seems like everyone is on board to have that cost benefit analysis brought back to us.
Madam Chair, I do apologize. We got a little bit of ahead of ourselves. I don't know that you've called for public comment, and I believe we do have one public comment.
Thank you. I was going to ask about that, but I think it was when I was muted. But it wasn't muted on my end.
Oh.
You guys muted me.
Well, we muted you. There you go.
Yeah.
We do have a member that a public comment request if you'd like to entertain that. And if we have any others, folks should raise their hands.
Christina?
Yes, we have Jacob Adams. Mr. Adams, please unmute yourself. You have 2 minutes.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much. This is Jacob Adams and Matthew Foldy with the Washington Free Beacon. We were covering this and would love to get more information about the thermal effect that you described in the report, Mr. Cordero, from January 9th, 2020, and any role that played in the conversations that we're having today about possible early retirement.
Sure. So bus 2004 was involved in a thermal event, not related to the charging station that was published in some of our local newspapers. That bus was involved in a thermal event from the front section of the bus. We haven't had any results from the investigations that was performed by Proterra's investigation team. Still asking for the results on that. Apparently there's a discussion going on between Proterra and Keolis. Keolis had their investigators as well. But that thermal event did not involve the charging station. Bus 2004 was not burned while it was charging, and it was just some type of an equipment failure on the front dash of the bus.
And Mr. Adams, we'd be glad to have Felicia Friesema, our Director of Communications, follow up with you, and she can provide additional information as well.
That would be great. I was in touch with her earlier this week.
Okay, great. I'll make sure she circles back with you.
Thanks so much.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. Okay, is there any other public comment?
Madam Chair, that concludes public comment.
Okay, it seems that we've done executive board comments and questions, and we are going to receive and file that motion unless there is anyone else who wants to chime in.
Yeah, before we go forward, just like
Yes.
I had a bunch of things that were just kind of jumbled that I was trying to address. And again, my colleagues were able to address some of those as well. Yeah, I do think that we definitely need to focus and direct, the possibilities of finding a legislative fix for this. I just don't want to let it go that, we want to make sure that that Foothill needs to be commended. The definition of pioneering is very simple: to begin or develop something and pave the way for others to follow. And the fact that we were willing to take that plunge and take this on, again, like Felicia said in some of her comments earlier this week, that, we were not naive in thinking that this was just going to be smooth and there weren't going to be any issues. And, we're identifying those issues, not just for ourselves, but for others in the future. And I mean, this is not going, this is the future. A battery electric transportation is not going away. As we said, it is mandated. And so what we're doing here is to be commended, and we shouldn't be, a black mark for the work that has happened here, but we also need support. As we heard from John, several times in his comments, that they are committed, that they, to supporting Foothill in our endeavors. And so going forward, hopefully we can strengthen that and see where we can go from there. So.
And Mayor Moss, Dorn, if I can say something, we are on the 5th generation. We call it the ZX5, zero emission, extended range, 5th generation. We thought we would call it Roland Cordero model because Roland had so much to do with so many things on this vehicle. And Mayor Moss, you were exactly right. You should be commended. We were the first along with you. And sometimes that comes with a lot of challenges, but we've made a lot of advances. And I couldn't thank, the entire board, Foothill Transit, Roland, his team, the contractors who have helped us get to the spot where we're at today with the new technology in 2021. So just thank you one more time to everyone.
And as Dorn pointed out, we didn't put all of our eggs in one basket. We didn't this wasn't our entire fleet. We very thoughtfully stepped out and were experimenting, and we took that first plunge. And so, yes, definitely, Mr. Cordero and his team, thank you for being so diligent and stringent in the operation of this. I don't want to totally call it an experiment, but I guess that's exactly what it has been. But thank you very much.
Absolutely.
I remember having a discussion with Brian Popple. I believe we were in New York at the time, where he came and spoke with us. And I remember telling him a story of when a salesman came to my parents' door and was trying to convince my dad to buy one of the electric little Roombas that goes all by itself around the house. And my mom was, we just have to get this. This is amazing. And it's pioneering. And my dad was, no, it's too expensive. And why would we want to do that? And there were a lot of them hadn't been sold, and there wasn't a lot of information on them. But my mom convinced my dad that that was the best thing. Well, my dad never got up from his chair so much in his life to get that Roomba from being stuck somewhere, because it really wasn't achieving the goal that it was supposed to be, going all around the house, and it would take care of itself if it got stuck somewhere. But recently I went to a friend's who, while we were sitting down, this thing went around the more advanced one and cleaned the whole house. And I thought, I'm going to get one of those because this is amazing. And it doesn't get stuck anymore. And if my parents were alive to see that today, my mom would be telling my dad, see, you just had to try it out and give all our complaints, and now it's much better. So I kind of think about that a lot, because it was like the first electric go on your own vacuum cleaner, but it didn't come with a lot of heartache, and I'm sure a lot of refinement. And I know that all of us as elected officials in our own cities, we wouldn't get anything done or put anything on our agendas looking forward to maximize the benefits of something for our city if we just said, well, it's not working very well. And we do that with most everything we do. And I can't think of one thing we've done in our city that hasn't had some hiccups that was a huge benefit. And I'm sure, Becky, with your Go Monrovia program, you know that, right? So I think it is a wonderful thing to be the pioneers in something. And yes, you're always going to have people who are going to criticize you for making that investment. But if someone doesn't take that first step, we wouldn't be where we are today in so many things, including technology. So I just want to commend everyone who has anything to do with the beginnings of electrified buses and continuing into the future. So thank you all for that. And we are going to receive and file. I think that staff has direction. Doran, you have any last?
No, I guess two things. One, we will continue to work on this topic and look at possible options. Again, this is the beginning of the discussion, certainly not the end. I guess the last thought I would leave you with is that, again, being pioneers is challenging, and we are doing things others haven't done. Proterra has been a key partner for us. We work very hard to hold Proterra accountable for their end of the deal. And I want to assure you that we are doing that. I talk to the Proterra team regularly. I think Roland talks to the Proterra team sometimes hourly. I've called John in some very strange places telling him I have a problem. And John's like, I'm on vacation, but okay. And, we really push Proterra to do the things that they need to be doing in terms of their end of the partnership. We'll continue to do that. But at the end, this is a challenging space that others have not waded into. So it's really that balance of keeping all of these things moving forward. More to come.
Doran, but it's not just for us, just as Corey Kaleke had pointed out. In technology, what is it, you said 3 years, Corey?
Oh, yeah.
But this isn't just for us. This really should be rectified in terms of legislation and grant funding to recognize that if we have huge demands on our performance.
Oh, yeah.
And if we're going to be using this cutting edge technology, it has to really reflect reality.
Right.
And you can't expect this type of cutting edge technology to last 12 years without having huge advances in the beginning. You know, it becomes quickly outdated, whether it be a fax machine, an iPhone, or whatever, and especially electric buses. So
for those who remember beta players, imagine requiring
yes.
12 years.
Right.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you all for the discussion and for the input. We'll be back. More to come.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Roland.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we move to item 9, Express Service Levels Update. And Joe Raquel, Director of Planning, is going to make this presentation. Morning, Joe.
Good morning. Here we go. Hi, good morning, everyone. Earlier, everyone talked about crystal balls, ridership trend lines. We're about to talk about it and see how everything kind of goes out the window here. Next slide, please. Good morning, Chair Sternquist and members of the Executive Board. As you recall, last month, I briefed the board on ridership trends that we were experiencing when I was talking about Express Service Line 499. And as you can see, here's one of the slides where I compared the ridership months over 3 fiscal years. Next slide, please. So this is the local ridership, and then this is the express ridership. As you can see, the express ridership has not rebounded as fast. Hence, some of the adjustments we made on current ridership, on the current express service levels. Next slide, please. So things change so fast. Comparing month to month really doesn't make sense because things can change on a dime. So here I'm comparing ridership from May 21 to July, the first week of July, by looking at weeks. So here's local ridership. As you can see by the trend line, things are going up. And remember, this was before the latest mask mandate that came into effect this past Sunday. But just looking at the numbers here, we're about 53% where we were pre-pandemic in terms of weekly ridership, which is very good on the local routes. Next slide, please. But looking at the express, even though the trend line seems to be going up, we are still at about 1/5 or 20% the current ridership levels we were pre-pandemic, and that. And I know board member Kalaikai talked about express ridership. They are lower than they were pre-pandemic, again at 20%. And in response to this lower ridership, next slide, please. We've made adjustments to the routes. In January, we actually reduced the level of express service. On the left here, you see the October 2020 service, which was considered full levels of express. I've highlighted the 5 a.m. hour. Here, there are 10 trips. And due to the lower ridership and strain on resources during the pandemic surge, we had to reduce the level of service. So what you see is what we're running now. If you notice at the 5 o'clock hour, we are running about half the trips or 5 trips. So in the past, we were running 10 trips during the 5 o'clock hour, but we've adjusted service levels to meet ridership demands. And now we're running about five trips an hour. 699 is our most frequent routes. At its peak pre-pandemic, we were going 5-minute frequencies at the peak of the peak, but now you can see we're going at about every 15 minutes or so. Next slide, please. So how does that, so what is that service adjustment? So here you see the list of the revenue hours and trips we had throughout the day for the express routes. The adjustments we've made, we've reduced the express service by 35%, but in the grand scheme of things, that's only a 3% overall reduction in service when you count all the local service. So even though the express ridership has seen a big drop and we reduced what seems like a large amount of service, in the overall scheme of things, that's only 3% of service. So the express service is really a small piece of what we run. Next slide, please. Coming after me will be Felicia Friesema, who will talk more about the summer sale, but I'm going to kind of give you a sneak preview. As you can see by the sales in the table there, for the first half of July, we've sold more passes for the products listed than we have in the months of May and June, which is a good sign. And that's only halfway through the month. And we're hoping that this will indicate an increase in ridership in the future or of the upcoming months. Next slide, please. Here, as I mentioned earlier, things change on a dime. So rather than looking at ridership, I showed you ridership by the month, by the week. So now we're looking at ridership by the day. And this is all ridership for the first 10 days in July, even though the trend line there shows it's pretty flat. That's it's actually trending up a little bit. But when you add the daily ridership, it's actually, so far, it's higher than what we experienced during the pandemic. So ridership seems to be trending up, maybe. Next slide, please. So this is the express ridership. As you can see, this has a greater slope in terms of trend line. There's no data for 3, 4, and 5 because that was the weekend and the July 4th holiday was observed during the 5th. So are things looking up? We don't know why. Next slide, please. Because as you know, there are many moving parts when it comes to determining ridership. We've got the schools going back into session in person. We're hoping that'll have a positive impact. We are actually reactivating our 3 lines, 851, 853, and 854, which serve primarily the high schools in our area. So we're hoping that'll help. The colleges are planning to go back in session. But then again, we've got the new mask mandate that kicked in LA County on Sunday. We don't know what that's going to do. And we don't know what the new hybrid schedules will do for the express levels. So in answer to Member Boyer's question, Chris, and to kind of solidify what Doran said, our crystal balls are very murky. The trend lines might as well be a roller coaster because, as you know, things change on a day-by-day basis. But at least going forward for now, we will still continue to run the express levels at the reduced service. And if the ridership goes up, then we will go ahead and proper adjustment. Next slide, please. So this concludes my presentation. The recommendation is to receive and file the express service levels update report. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Joe, we're going to go to Christina, see if there's any public comment first.
Madam Chair, I've received no request to speak.
Okay. Do we have any questions or comments?
I just wanted to comment on staff. I just want to commend them for keeping service up and providing it in such challenging times. The fact that we were able to have service at all in many instances was a miracle. And so thank you for doing that.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, we are going.
One quick question. Does the reduction in the express service equate to some surplus equipment that's not being used, or is do we use the same bus or buses, whether it's 5 or 10?
The reduction in service, it does give us a little more buses that are available. But then again, if we decide to ramp up service or start ramping it up, we know we will have those resources available. And a lot of times,
in the short term, though, it can help us with hiccups with like the 291.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Essentially, what we've asked the contractors to do is to assign the vehicles and personnel that they would have doing express routes where we've pulled that back a little bit. Those vehicles are then available to help cross cover any service interruptions that we have, any service delivery issues. We've also been monitoring and working with the contractors as they're dealing with their own personnel challenges related to COVID, related to, again, all of the various things that we're seeing in the broader society. They've been working through many of those challenges from a workforce standpoint. So it's been it's been a challenging time on many levels.
All right. If there's no other comments, we're going to receive and file the express service levels update report. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
We're going to move to item 10, summer sale update, and Felicia is here with us to make this presentation.
And congratulations, I think I'm the last presentation today. Good morning, members of the Executive Board. I'm delighted to bring you some of the early outcomes of the Foothill Transit Summer Sale and to help you close out what has been both a very interesting and informative meeting and an interesting week for all of us. Next slide, please. Now, by way of quick background, you approved the summer sale back at your April meeting, and we hit the ground running. The campaign was crafted in May and then launched in June with a full-scale launch on July 1. And while we're all happy to have launch done, the work is not done. Promotions will continue in earnest through September. Next slide. So how's it going so far? In a word, awesome. We don't have a full month's figures yet for July. We were well above previous month sales for 31-day passes at the midpoint, with Silver Streak passes outpacing them all at 4 times the previous month's sales. Commuter Express passes were selling at 2.5 times the previous month. Local 31-day passes had already reached previous month's sales and are expected to far outpace May and June. While not as dramatic, our one-day and discounted passes are also seeing gains over previous months and are expected to end the month ahead of May and June as well. Next slide, please. Now, one of the goals of the summer sale was to foster positive community engagement and improve digital engagement across the board. Happy to say that this campaign has borne really good positive fruit. Organic shares of our information have been high, and people are already asking what's next. I'd like to add something else to this in that our Spanish outreach campaign has been incredibly successful, and we're getting an immense amount of positive feedback from our Spanish-speaking customers. Next slide, please. Correlating ridership with the summer sale is an ongoing process, as Joe noted, and it is still a little too early for us to see a clear-cut correlation. But what we can say is that July traditionally is usually a down month for ridership, thanks to the positioning of a national holiday and with the prevalence of people taking vacation time. With that said, average weekday boardings, our Monday through Friday boardings for July, measured a 3% gain over June. And it should be noted that this average weekday boarding data doesn't include July 5th data, since that was the national observed holiday and we ran holiday service on that day. We will be watching this data very carefully over the coming months. Next slide, please. Looking ahead, it's pretty simple. You can expect a strong continuation of summer sale campaign messaging to help keep sales momentum. There will be more data tracking to make sure that we're on track with our goals and shifting message where necessary to keep things fresh. As the school term starts, we're going to be jumping headfirst and engaging with our local schools. And going forward, we want to hang on to the attention that we've gained by offering new products that resonate better with our customers' new commuting needs. One thing we've always tried to do with our campaigns, be they pandemic practices or this summer sale, is to immediately share what we've learned with other agencies and share all of our collateral and graphics with them so that public transit as a whole can benefit from what we do here. A rising tide lifts all boats, and we want our successes to be everyone's. Next slide. Recommendation is to receive and file. I'll be happy to answer any of your questions.
Okay, Christina, do we have any public comment?
I received no request to speak.
Any board comments or questions?
Cynthia, I don't know if this would be the right time to insert this, but since our conversation at the beginning regarding school-age kids, would it be reasonable or advantageous for us to entertain or look into educational programs that actually educate school-age kids on using the buses and maybe planning special trips or something like that to getting them used to riding the bus? I don't know. I don't know if we've ever actually tried doing that. That, as we discussed at length, that K-12 thing really it should have a different title to it.
Now I'm going to go back and say that we need to take Michelle's and dub future transit riders as Foothill's program.
Right. And so that we could actually be educating the future riders and getting them, and then in the process, we'd be educating their parents as well.
Member Shevlin, I'll respond to that really quickly in saying that this has been a part of our marketing program since I started here 18 years ago. We have a very robust community engagement program that includes very heavy involvement with the local school districts, where our manager of community engagement, Linda Apodaca, goes and visits schools and does presentations about how to ride the bus. We also occasionally do facilitations of helping those school classrooms take visits. Now, that hasn't happened obviously in the past year because of the pandemic, but we have done field trips to local city council offices and other things for schools and facilitated learning for workability programs, especially the Pomona Unified School District. So yes, we are absolutely doing those things and we'll continue to ramp those up.
And I suppose that's where a disconnect is. I don't know about the other electeds, but sometimes there's a gap in communication between council and school boards and what they're doing. So we're not always really aware of or whether or not our school district is participating. So maybe we could strengthen then that education component to us as well, and how we could be reaching out to our local school districts to participate in that.
Good suggestion.
And I just want to commend staff on, all your great work and, again, the brilliant ideas that we come up with as far as the program, and just really excited to see that it is successful. So good job, everybody.
All right. Any final questions, comments? Thank you, Felicia. We are going to receive and file the summer sale update. Okay. We don't need any further public comment. We got through all of that. We move to our Chief Executive Officer comment.
All right, just a couple of quick things. First off, as you saw, there's certainly a lot of things that are happening, a lot of things that are moving, much more to come. I did get a note that our student age, which was asked earlier, apparently we don't have a student age, so maybe that's something we want to think about. We do allow 2 individuals under 5 years old to ride free with an adult paying customer. So as you can see, there's certainly continued work that we'll be doing and much more discussion that we'll be having. I really appreciate everybody taking a deep dive on these issues. They're complex, they're complicated, they're reflective of the times that we're living in, and I'm confident that we're going to have other topics like this as well as follow-ons here. And we're just super grateful for your engagement and for your thoughtfulness as we tackle these really tough issues. Some of you, some of you that were with me on Zoom earlier in the week may have seen my Zoom background that said clear as mud. That's kind of the theme of the week, is clear as mud. But we'll work through them. That's what we do. I would note that COVID continues to be an ongoing and daily topic for us. We are monitoring and responding to changes in the county health order as they come along and as changes are happening in the community. We didn't talk a lot about that during regular items today, but again, that is continues to be a dominating theme in pretty much everything that we do. So I'm sure it will continue to be so. As we look to our August meeting, our initial hope was that this meeting might have been able to have been an in-person meeting. We'll be assessing the situation closely with, again, the hope of having you be able to convene in person in August. But who knows? As the agenda was going out the door Friday, the county health order changed on Thursday of last week, and we had to pivot. So stay tuned, more to come. Thank you.
Okay, great. Any board member comments?
Great meeting.
Yes, thank you, everyone. I would just like to remind you, Doran, if you could just make a note down, you probably already have, just that at all our upcoming meetings, if we can continue to have the updates, the sale information is really important, and I think it will kind of direct us to see if maybe we would like to extend that at some point.
Yep.
So by having that update regularly, that would be really helpful. And also, I'd really like to continue to get Devin's updates on the Future Riders of America program, or whatever you want to call it.
There we go. Yeah, no, absolutely. We will bring to you continuing updates on the fair sale, and sometimes sales get extended a little bit, and we'll bring that to you for any consideration in plenty of time should you choose to do that. So when we're not talking about fareless and COVID and electric buses and other things, lots more to come.
Right. And I think these meetings are great because it makes me think of other things that could be possibilities down the way. And when we were talking about the program with Metro at what's it called, the UPass, there could be some opportunities how cities could use some of their funding that we currently fund for our transit programs within our own city. Yep. To do something that could be similar for some of our seniors with certain limit requirements, and they purchase something like a $10 a year program or pass, kind of like the Mount Sac students pay annually, and then a ride is a certain amount. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that we could kind of glean from this program and see how we could even extend it into our own cities. So if everyone kind of would think about how that could possibly be useful, I think it would be helpful. And we could definitely then increase ridership also with Foothill Transit.
And as I said just earlier, that whole connection with, I'm just thinking of specifically Monrovia and our Monrovia Unified School District, that I become more aware of really how they're participating in any kind of educational program for growing those future riders.
Yes. I'm sure we could come up with some kind of acronym for that that's really clever.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Well, we are adjourned. Have a great afternoon, and let's all keep in contact. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Bye.
Thank you.
Be safe.
Bye all.
Bye.
Bye.